Fake news and police copter cover-ups for October 2nd. At 11:27 a.m. I was sitting on the wall of the planter bed on the driveway. If you're looking at my house from the street, I was on the right wall and I was sitting there looking at the news about the Las Vegas massacre that included my family because my little brother was at that concert and he was in the kill zone, and then the bullets followed him from where he was across the back, diagonally across the venue, over a wall, across the street, down the street, and around the corner. And so it was a little bit too much of a coincidence. And then also later events show the same intellect and same logic covering things up. So that's what I'm dealing with. And so when they first started creating the surveillance routine around the neighborhood, the police helicopter flew over my head from the back of my house towards the front and waved the tail at me like this is the cover-up of all cover-ups. And that's the time when I deleted the apps when he came back and harassed me and I recorded it. That's why they do the return to my house events so much. And recently they started doing fake events where they'd have a burglary alarm and then 30 minutes later another burglary alarm around the city at the same location though, so that they would have returns to other locations as well in the city. And so he flew across my house and he was silhouetted against the clouds doing a tail wave so everyone can see that. Then he made a right turn out into the copter pocket across the street from me. At 5:57 p.m. the police copter came. He crossed from he crossed up from the copter pocket going left to right, and then he went up behind the two-story house and crossed over 24092 at Solero de Seo and near 24092. And then he made a bit of a left, and then it's like they called him and gave him a call. So he's like, oh, what? Is that so? And then he took off left and made a big U-turn and accelerated a lot and then mobbed towards my head. But first of all, when he got to 24092, he went really slow on it, because going slow like that and pausing is equivalent to doing power circles. You can either go really slow or you can do circles. You're in a helicopter, Your Honor. It's very difficult to deal with. And so that's part of the concept too, because if there's an event today, all they have to do tomorrow is just make it part of the routine, which is flying past it once, and then they're allowed to do anything on that line. Then they can do backflips, anything. And so he turned around and then he mobbed back over my house basically. And so the point of that was to do the 11 o'clock line backwards at the speed too, because he flew aggressively over my house that night when they let me out at 11 to spotlight me on Caladad. And so he darted back at me, then he crossed basically over my backyard, and then a left curve and back up El Dorado Park. And so then he made a left out in El Dorado Park, and he came back at 6. That was at 6 p.m., the dart back part. So at 5:57, he came up behind the two-story house. 6 p.m., he was darting back after he received his fake call. And that's also a return, because of the return when they chased me to Caladad and then chased me back. And then at 6:05 p.m., he was doing circles at Oliveira and Deseo. And so I think that might be the one where they posted the fake grand theft or something. There's so many fake news events. And then at 6:36, he was doing circles at Castilla and Geronimo Montilla, which is part of the event with the tail wave. So now the problem with that is that that's a unique event, and then they just doubled down on it. But also at other times, they've separated it into situational things like fake calls. So it's odd to have calls on one day and then another day and another day that all have the same exact routine movement. And then also on top of that, having your fake daily surveillance that doesn't incorporate calls hitting the same movements in the same lines. So at 6:36, he was doing circles at Geronimo Montilla and Castilla, and that's because if you incorporate small circles, say there's two damming events in a small area, like a couple hundred yards apart, and you connect them with a big circle, then it's all encompassed, and that means that you can do anything. It's the same concept as flying by a problem spot on your line and creating that as a new line, because then you can drop your sandwich at any point on that line, or you can get a call at any point on that line, or you can pause and check and be thorough at any point on that line, so that you can dismiss power circles, which aren't just power circles, that are 60 feet altitude threats. At 6:45 p.m. he left and he did a big swoop out around the neighborhood, the big left circle all the way up and probably around the park, and then out towards Tribuco, Marguerite, and back around behind 24092, but I didn't see the end of it. And then at 11:05, he was in the copter pocket, and he was going towards Geronimo-Alicia intersection. So he basically did go up and around the neighborhood and then came back 20 minutes later after he probably did other cover-ups on other houses in the neighborhood.